Silence. People often say that silence is golden, but I beg to differ. Take the moment just now as an example. I'm sure most of you were thinking, why isn't she saying anything? But here's the thing. While all of you had that thought in your heads, none of you dared say anything out loud to address it. I'm a student in a local school in Hong Kong, and being in my final year of high school, you'd be surprised at what a common occurrence that silence actually is in my everyday life. So at school during lessons, the teachers would look around the classroom and ask, can anyone give me an answer to this question? Would anyone like to volunteer, speak up? Any thoughts, comments? And as always, the students would divert their gaze away from the teacher, making sure to never make eye contact and remain completely unresponsive until the teacher answers his or her own question in resignation. Now, I know this very well, not only because, and I'll be honest, I used to be one of those quiet, meek students in the classroom, but also because I've been on the receiving end of it as well. As a senior student at school, I'm in charge of a number of clubs and societies, and I have to regularly host trainings and workshops for competitions or whatnot. And I make it a habit to ask my students these questions. What do you want to learn today? What do you expect? And any questions? And every single time, I'm met with this resounding silence. Now, this is very shocking for me, because I don't understand how students can be so passive in their own education and learning, much less something they themselves signed up for. What's even more interesting is that this silence is even more evident the older the students get. In junior years, they'd be ambivalent, quiet, awkward maybe, try to raise their hand a little, only to put it back down. Senior students, on the other hand, just slouch in their chairs and give me a look that says, you know we're not going to give you an answer anyways. Why bother? Just move on. I see a lot of my friends and teachers in the audience here today nodding because it's so true. And this is a phenomenon that really struck me, because education is supposed to be a two-way street. We were supposed to learn and grow and transform within the system, yet the longer we stay in it, the more quiet we get. In our junior years, we're ambivalent, but as we get older, we're antagonistic, flippant. And given this regression, I wouldn't be surprised if students were completely mute in university lectures. I mean, you guys here would know that better than I do, but this is the reality that struck me. And as a soon-to-be university student, this is not the education I want for myself. So why is this silence so pervasive? I think it boils down to two things. First of all is peer pressure. Often, we have this really deep-rooted mindset that characterizes active, eager students as goody two-shoes, or what we in Cantonese would call ta hai, which essentially means sucking up to teachers, making a good impression, getting a good grade. And because of that, students fear judgment and scrutiny that comes from their peers. But beyond that, when other students are silent, speaking up makes you the odd one out. And so we create this dynamic in the classroom where students are afraid to interact with their peers, with their teachers, and with their own education. Much like the moment of silence just now when I began my talk, when others are silent, you're compelled to stay silent as well. And so the silence continues. Second of all is curriculum. Too often in Hong Kong, we teach our students in a way that's not conducive to encouraging debate and discussion. We're tied down to marking schemes, past papers, mock exams, and more, and that pushes students to stick to the given answers. But furthermore, this also pushes students to expect answers coming from teachers, because when they develop a habit of not answering in class, they expect teachers to spoon-feed that information. And the problem with that is when teachers and leaders and educators give you the answers, students fall back into this conformity where they don't have to think for themselves and become mindless followers of instruction and information. the impacts are devastating. And this isn't only because it's something that manifests in the classroom. Students aren't only afraid to speak on academic issues, they're also afraid to assert themselves in their personal lives. It manifests in a way where they're afraid to talk about their own opinions, their views, their personal struggles. In Hong Kong, a lack of civic involvement can be attributed to very one-way discussions and a lack of engagement and exposure to the world. The rise in student suicides in Hong Kong in particular can be attributed to a very stifling education system that silences suffering voices. So how do we curb the situation? This is where debate comes into the picture. I think debate is an educational tool. It empowers individuals and equips them to engage with the world. Now, I'm a very avid speaker and an active debater, both in Hong Kong and internationally. But a couple years back, I was not as outspoken as I am now. This is me. Around 13 years back, I used to do ballet. And to me, ballet embodied elegance, restraint, but above all, conformity. And every week it would be like this, just a bunch of girls dressed in identical outfits with pink tutu and all, just parroting the instructor's every single move. I craved the freedom to explore my own creativity, but that was not given to me through classical dance. Yet I remained silent without question or protest. A couple years had passed by, and my parents realized, why is our daughter so quiet? And so they enrolled me in debate classes to help me develop my poise. And I think looking back, this was my turning point. When I learned to debate on global issues from different perspectives, I also learned to listen, understand, to empathize. The confidence I gained from speaking on the debate stand also translated to my personal life. I was much more comfortable with asserting myself. I traded my ballet slippers for a pair of boxing gloves. I embraced my love of literature and strayed away from the very narrow path of medicine and science that was expected of me. And having experienced this transformation that debate had offered me, I realized that it could help others as well. So armed with this realization, I wanted to use debate as a tool to help the people around me as well. And being an active member of the debate team at school, I realized I was in the perfect position to use it to empower my fellow classmates. So I started with the junior cohort at school and hosted debate trainings and workshops. The first step was getting them to engage, to be feisty, to argue. But how do we translate that into growth and learning? I did this first by letting them steer their own training. Sure, guidance and teaching is still necessary, but we retain the element where students are able to voice out their opinions and shape the way they're taught. If they think there aren't enough opportunities to compete, we get student-organized tournaments. Or if they think the training doesn't really cater to their needs, we have a tiered system that caters to a diversity and a disparity in debate experience. The result? Students were engaged, they argued, and they learned. This shows the importance of showing students that their voices matter. That's why I think debate isn't only a tool where we encourage discourse, but also one where we empower students' voices and show them that they can fight for their passions. Because only when we actually demonstrate that their voices matter and that they can effectuate actual change, be it in their education or in the world, that's when they're compelled to speak up. A year ago, a dear friend of mine and myself founded an organization called Kaleidoscope, where we basically aim to go to underprivileged schools in Hong Kong and teach them very basic English, debating, and public speaking skills. And we aim to do this because we want to go into the communities that need this help the most and that lack these opportunities for these students to voice out their opinions and to empower their voices. And so today, I encourage you to implement this in whatever your capacity is. be it as professors, as students, whether you're in a high school or in university. Debate can be used and implemented into our school curriculums. It can be used in student organizations for policy stimulation, for student unions or student bodies, for advocacy, for civic engagement, and more. Debate is a tool. It empowers people, it gives them voice, and it equips individuals to engage with the world around them. People often say that the best way, that before you deal with something, you have to understand what you're dealing with. And in my view, debate is the best way to do so. So I leave you with this thought today. Now, I know after my talk, you're not all going to join a debate team or whatnot, but at the very least, when given the opportunity, I hope you break the silence, be it at a school lecture, at a business meeting, at a community discussion. Learn to critically appraise for yourself and ask, am I going to fall back, or am I going to engage in debate with this idea? Am I going to be young and impressionable, or will I discuss and exchange my views? So at the end of the day, I hope that sharing the joys of debating and the benefits it brings to our society not only curbs the silence in our educational system, but at the end of the day also inspires passionate individuals and gets our community to join this movement of activism and engagement. Thank you.